Hello and welcome to the shop. I've been saying that I was going to do this for a long time now, and today is the day I'm finally going to get started and give it a shot. I got a nice rod of plastic. It's about 8 inches long. I got it from Classic Nib. It's called Aegean C. I hope I pronounced it right. Aegean, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. It's a beautiful blue and green. And what I'm going to do is we're going to attempt to turn a kitless pin on the Atlas metal lathe. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. Let's find out together. We're going to start by making our section, and I cut a 50mm long piece off the rod, and I've got it installed in my collet chuck. I'm going to go ahead now and face it off. I need to drill a 15/64 inch hole 30mm into my blank. I've marked the bit, and right here where the red starts, that is exactly 30mm from the tip. I'm going to use a starter bit and put a dimple in the end of my blank to ensure that I get a nice straight start with my bit. I've chucked up a 7/64 inch bit, and we're going to go ahead and drill the rest of the way through our blank. I need to cut a 10mm tenon on the end of this blank, and I need to cut it exactly 10.3mm into the blank. I've got a mark here, and just to the right of that red line is exactly 10.3mm. The blank started out at 20mm, and I'm down to 17.85mm. You can see that this process is going to take a bit of time, so instead of filming it all, I'm going to shut the camera off, get it out of the way. That'll let me be more careful as I'm going into my shoulder here to ensure that I don't take any more away than I need to. I'll go ahead and get this down to 10mm, and we'll come back and pick up right there. I've got my tenon cut to exactly 10.12mm. Now that is a tiny bit over 10, but that is such a small amount it won't hurt anything, and our die will go right over that and put a beautiful set of threads on there. I've got two things I want to do before I use the die to thread it. Number one, I want to cut a small relief on the back of the tenon. That way, as I'm threading this into the body, the threads will stop from the body to the section, and it won't lock as tightly onto the section. Sometimes they lock in really tight and you can't break them loose. That'll stop that. The other thing I want to do is put a little chamfer on the end of this, just to kind of, that will allow my die to start nicely, and it will also allow me to very easily get it started in the body of the pin. That should do very nicely for the relief on the back of the tenon. Now I'm going to reset the tool in my tool rest, and I'm going to come in and put a nice little chamfer on the end of the tenon. Here's a close-up of the tenon. You can see the relief on the back and a nice little chamfer on the front. I'm ready now to go ahead and cut some threads on this tenon. I've already lubricated it, and I'm just going to use the tap and die holder, and I'm just going to feed it on there and let it cut the threads. A couple of cranks forward and then a crank or two backwards to remove the chips, break them off. I flipped the die around inside the tap and die holder, and now we're going to go ahead and run it up on the threads one last time just to ensure that we have a nice clean cut. Taking a very close look at my tenon, you'll notice where I cut my relief, it wasn't quite deep enough. I'm going to go ahead and clean that up a little bit and make it just a little deeper, because what's going to happen is if I thread a body onto this section, this little hump here is going to keep it from seating nice and flat against the shoulder of the section. I've reset the cutter in the tool holder, and I'm ready to go ahead and clean up the back of that tenon. That's much better. Let me grab the body from a pin that I've already made, and let's do a quick test fit. And you can see we've got a really nice surface fit at the back end of this section. I've remounted my section in a threaded mandrel, and I've brought up a 60-degree live center just to provide some support. I need to go ahead and turn this blank down to 12 millimeters in diameter. I've got the blank roughly turned down to probably somewhere between 14 and 15 millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and move the camera out of the way because I've just been turning this with one hand because it's difficult to maneuver with the camera, and I want to slow down and take nice smooth cuts to make sure that I have a good surface on my blank when I get it close to the 12 millimeter mark. I'll come back and show it to you once we hit 12 millimeters. My section has been trued to 12 millimeters, and you can see I've got a little line right here. This is 23 millimeters in length. That is going to be the grip, and this will be the nib for my section. So we're going to go ahead and resort to a more traditional turning tool. This is a very small little gouge, and I'm going to use that for shaping the section as well as the nib. I'll take a couple of quick cuts on camera, and then I may have to shut the camera off because I'm not sure I can get the right positioning with the camera in the way. I think that'll do quite nicely for a grip. It needs a little cleaning up. There's a couple little ridges in there. I think part of that, there's two reasons that cause that. Number one, I think my gouge could use a little sharper edge on it. It might need to be run across the grinder. And number two, I'm turning at such a slow speed, I'm just not getting as smooth of a cut as I would like. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and use a parting tool, and I'm going to cut a shoulder, and then we'll go back to the gouge and start shaping this into a nib. I've got a nice pleasing shape there. I really like how this is turning out. What I want to do now is I'm going to get this off the lathe. I'm going to insert a refill in here and find out just where the tip of the nib stops in the refill, so I know where I've got to cut this off. And I won't actually cut it off. We'll just keep turning it down and turning it away until we have the proper amount of nib sticking through the end of our section. I've removed the section from the mandrel, and I went ahead and grabbed a Parker refill. If we insert it into the section, take a look at that. It is perfect. All we really need to do is clean that end up, and honestly, I think I'll do that with a little sandpaper because I really like the shape of this and I don't want to take a chance. You can see there's a tiny little chip right there, but that'll sand away because there's plenty of material between the nib and the outside of the section. So I think we're ready to go to sanding. I have my section back in the mandrel, and I've grabbed a piece of 120 grit Abernet, and I'm just going to start shaping the end of this. What I want is I've got a nice square shoulder here, but I want to sort of take some of that harshness away so that it transitions nicely into the nib. I'll also use the Abernet to kind of clean up this little concave section here, give it a nice smooth feel because there are a few ripples in there. And then we'll move to micro mesh, sand this down, and I'll come back and show it to you right before I polish it. And here is the newly completed section. I am really happy with how it turned out. I like the shape, I like the feel. I've got a nice extension of the ink refill at the end. Let me grab the body of another pen and try it on, just see how it looks. Here's a shot of the nib on the body of a pen. I've got a really nice fit here from the threads to the section. Let me just try a cap, make sure there's no issue. Not at all. It's going to fit really nicely. I am very happy with how that turned out. I'd really like to thank you for joining me for this video. I know I said I was going to turn a kitless pen, but I really don't want the video to be super long, and this is a rather drawn out process. But this is a quick shot again of the section I created. I am very happy with it. The next video I'll be building a body to match, and the final video will do the cap. I would like to thank you for joining me. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon, and have a great evening.